Welcome to the Corporate Director Podcast, where we discuss the experiences and ideas behind what's working in corporate board governance in our digital tech-fueled world. Here, you'll discover new insights from corporate leaders and governance researchers with compelling stories about corporate governance, strategy, board culture, risk management, digital transformation, and more.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Corporate Director Podcast, the voice of modern governance. My name is Dottie Schindlinger, Executive Director of the Diligent Institute, and I'm joined once again by my co-host extraordinaire, Megan Day, Strategy Leader here at Diligent. Megan, how are you doing today?
I am great, Dottie. I am just catching up on all of the hot gossip with the PCAOB. We talked about that back in July, I believe it was, and the SEC chair finally ousted the head of that board, brought in somebody new. The drama never ends here in Washington, D.C.
Never ending drama. And, of course, what always happens, Megan, is we record these and the very next day, everything changes. So we don't know what this will sound like by the time you listen to this podcast, to be totally honest with you. It's all over the place. But actually, Megan, this is a little bit unrelated, but it is related in a way, because I was just reading the latest research that came out of Diligent Institute. We've just started doing quarterly something new called the General Counsel Risk Index. It's sort of a follow-on from our Director Confidence Index that we've been doing for the last 5 years. We wanted to find out from general counsels, what are they seeing as some of the key areas of risk? And related to the ups and downs of the PCAOB and what's happening with the SEC, what do you think that they listed as the top risk for their business or sector?
Well, I know the answer, Dottie.
What's the answer, Megan?
Because I read the same article. Regulatory changes.
Yes. General counsels are a little bit concerned by the rapid changes in the regulatory environment. And I got to think that this has a lot to do with executive orders, with the cuts of whole departments by DOGE, by some of the ups and downs and changes coming out of the budget bill, whether things are included, whether they're not included.
I mean, maybe they won't have to follow a Sarbanes-Oxley, all of these things. Bribery, it's on the table again.
Heaven forbid. Oh, but we kid. But we don't kid. I think if you're a general counsel right now, it is hard to keep on top of this. I think it's really challenging to keep everything straight. And, you got to ask yourself, okay, here's a new executive order. Does this go into effect immediately? Is it constitutional? There's quite a few things that you have to sort of figure out. And companies are really struggling to kind of keep on top of this. It was interesting, though, Megan, I don't know if you saw the section of this where we asked the same question of directors. They had a little bit of a different view. They were more interested about the economic impact of tariffs. And I wonder what you thought about that.
Well, I feel like it could be the classic director response of, well, our general counsel needs to be responsible for the regulatory changes. Let us focus on other issues.
Exactly. I mean, now, to be fair, the general counsels told us, 65% of them labeled changes in the regulatory environment as the number one risk. But 41%, the top two answer, 41% said the impact of economic tariffs is the second highest risk. And when you look at what's happening with directors' perspective, they list tariffs number one at 81%, and then supply chain and inflation and currency fluctuations were tied for second place at 48%. They listed changes in the regulatory environment a little further down. For them, only 23% felt that was a big risk. But to your point, Megan, it's because they've got good general counsels that are keeping on top of this and keeping them informed. I do think an interesting kind of segue to our guest today is the fact that we didn't see anything technological top this list. And that's kind of new. I mean, we ask directors these questions a lot about what do you see as the key area of risk? And often they say
it's cyber
risk. Yeah, cyber risk. Or they say AI, and what's going to happen with AI. In this survey, though, technological disruption for GCs, they rated that only 8% said that was a risk. Directors, only 6% said technological disruption was a big risk. Technological adoption and implementation came in a little higher. 12% of directors said that was a top risk. 23% of general counsel said that was a top risk. But it's nowhere in the top 3 or top 5. It's way down on the list. And so I think that kind of tells me a couple things. One is I'd be willing to bet that means a lot of them feel like they've got their AI and technology strategies kind of set by this point in the year. They're feeling pretty good about it. They're feeling like, it's okay. We know what we're doing. We don't feel like this is going to upend our business. But it also says, there's so much happening in the news cycle that feels much more existential and immediate. And so getting your arms around that might be the big challenge of the day. What's your take on it?
Well, I think, Dottie, that's a great way to tee up our conversation today with Beena Ammanath. Beena is the global head of Deloitte's AI Institute, very much an expert in this area, and she has a great perspective on why this should all be top of mind for folks.
Great. Well, let's give it a listen.
Joining us on the Corporate Director podcast today is Beena Ammanath. Beena is the global head of Deloitte's AI Institute, and she's also authored two very insightful books, Trustworthy AI and Zero Latency Leadership. Beena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan. I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, AI seems to be front and center in all conversations leaders are having today. So we are really excited to have you here with us. To start, could you share a little bit about your journey? What sparked your deep involvement with AI and the path that you've been on?
So I didn't choose AI. I just happened to make my way there. I studied computer science, and at that time we were going through the AI winter. So AI was not really a hot topic. It was more of theory. We couldn't really get our hands dirty. And I'm totally dating myself here because this was a long, long time ago. But when I started my career, I focused on data. I was fascinated on data management systems. And this was way back when we just had transactional databases. And then came the era of business intelligence and data warehousing. That was the next iteration of the data journey. And then came big data and machine learning and data science and AI. So a lot of what we heard about in theory of AI is now becoming real. So I'm super excited about where AI is today and the fact that everybody is talking about it, because this, I think, is one of the coolest and most powerful technology, and we can do so much good to the world if we use it rightly.
I love that. And I would love to hear a little bit more about the books that I mentioned in your introduction. What fueled your desire to write these, and how has that experience been for you?
Yeah, so I'm a technologist by training, and my entire journey has been in the space of applied technology, so applied data. I've worked in telecom companies, and I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in financial services and banks and trading companies. And what I've seen is how data and AI is applied in the real world. And there was a narrative when early on, when we started talking about ethics in AI, the conversation was very focused on bias. And I was working in a company where I was focused on making jet engines perform better or predicting jet engine failure. And I'm like, how does bias fit into it? Not really when you're looking at machine data, but there were other side effects of AI, like being able to have reliable algorithms, being able to understand how the algorithm was performing, more transparency. So that's how, trustworthy AI was born, really looking at it from as the side effects of AI. Yes, we can get tremendous value from AI, but it comes with certain side effects, whether it is bias and transparency, or whether it's reliability, whether it's impact on the workforce. And that was what got me interested into thinking about trustworthy AI. How do you build trust in AI systems by proactively thinking about those side effects and addressing it? So that was the birth of Trustworthy AI, and really looking at it from the impact of from an enterprise perspective, and what could organizations and what could leaders do to ensure that trust in AI systems are very much a practical guide, as opposed to just predicting the worst case scenarios, looking at it, what are the steps? And I also make it very clear in the book that it's impossible to identify every possible side effect. So leaders have a choice to make if you don't understand the full side effects, whether or not to use AI in that scenario. So that was Trustworthy AI. And then Zero Latency Leadership was once AI became more common, really looking at how can leaders thrive and succeed in this era of AI where humans and machines are working so closely together? What does this new kind of leadership look like at every level, right? Whether you are operating at a board level or at the C suite or at middle management or an early career manager, what do leaders need to do to make sure that humans and machines work in the best possible way where we get the maximum benefit with the minimum side effects? So those were the two books that I felt strongly about, and I didn't feel there was a perspective out there in the market, especially given my background of applied AI. I thought that there was something of value that I could share.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit further. In your books, you highlight the crucial need for technology literacy and decision making frameworks. Can you expand on why these are so important, especially from the lens of a board member?
Yeah. I think frameworks give you a starting point. I don't think any framework is a standalone by itself, it's going to be functional, but it gives you a starting point to make sure that you are asking the right questions. You're probing for the right answers. And that naturally needs also an understanding of the technology itself. A base level understanding of AI is absolutely crucial. So I'm a huge believer that every one of us needs to have a foundational understanding of technology and of AI, especially in this world that we live in today. AI literacy is not just to make sure that you perform your job effectively, it is just to be even a good citizen. It's just to be able to, when you read a hyped up newspaper headline, to be able to see and translate it into what that means for you as a human being, as a citizen, how relevant it is or how far stretched it is. I think AI literacy for today's world is absolutely crucial, and frameworks give you a starting point to go deeper into actually finding the solutions for making these AI systems more robust.
As we alluded to earlier, there seems to be a frenzy around AI in the corporate world right now. Many leaders are obviously eager to integrate AI immediately to see some of those benefits as soon as possible. What guidance would you offer leaders as they approach AI thoughtfully and effectively and avoiding potential disruptions to their workforce?
Look, there is going to be changes to the workforce. And, I'll start with an example, Megan, so that to make it a little bit more real. This was a way back when my data science AI team was looking at predicting X-ray machines outputs to help radiologists do their jobs better, to help the X-ray machine operator do their jobs faster. Now, as I've mentioned, I'm from a technology background, and as any technologist, I went deep into making sure that algorithm worked, with the most accuracy and the best possible way to make sure that it was done. And then as we were working with these operators, when we rolled out that system, we realized that the challenges that they were thinking about were much different than what we had anticipated. From an X-ray machine operator's perspective, he and she is thinking, okay, we can do X-rays faster, but it's not like humans are suddenly going to have an uptick in fractures. So, how does this impact my job? Will I still have an 8-hour job? If AI is going to make my job get done faster, what does that mean for my workday? So it was an interesting perspective, and very early on, I realized that is something that leaders need to consider from a workforce perspective. And too often we hear, "Oh, AI is going to make your job easier," or "AI is going to make you do your job faster." But I think you need to go a little bit deeper. As a leader, you have the responsibility to go a little bit deeper and actually translate into what happens when AI makes a job easier. What happens to that work day? If the job is being done faster in 4 hours, what is this employee supposed to be doing for the remaining 4 hours? We also talk a lot about, oh, AI will displace the workforce, but don't worry, it's going to create new jobs. But what are those new jobs? And that's something I've been thinking about a lot, right? That there are new jobs that's going to be created. But how do we actually define those job roles? How do we actually put a structure behind it, put a career path? What are the skills that's needed for these new jobs that will come up as more and more AI gets embedded into the systems? So I think leaders have a responsibility to go beyond just the cliches of AI is going to make your jobs easier or AI is going to take away the boring parts of your job, to actually defining what exactly does the new role look like, what once a job becomes easier, what's the creative part of your job that is going to occupy your days. So I do think leaders have a huge responsibility to proactively think about that.
Definitely. And there definitely seems to be a tension between being excited about embracing AI and possible, displacement fears of your job being taken away. And I think that's really practical advice for organizations to think about. During a recent roundtable, we discussed the impact of generative AI on succession planning and talent pipelines. How do you think leaders can nurture emerging talent when AI automates many foundational tasks, that have traditionally been stepping stones in career development?
That's such a great question. I am a big believer that no matter what your job is today, or no matter what your education is today, it's going to change. We've entered the era of continuous learning. I have two graduates this in the past 2 weeks, two
Congratulations.
sons, and we've been having more and more conversations on what should they focus on, what should they major in, what does this future look like for somebody coming fresh into the workforce. And no, not everybody has to become a data scientist or an AI engineer. There's still going to be a need for many of the jobs that's there. But I think the big shift is you need to become tech fluent. You need to become AI savvy, irrespective of whether you're graduating as a nurse or a doctor or a pilot. AI is going to be a tool that is going to be part of your role. I do think more and more universities are embedding AI fluency classes into these into their curriculum, but still, for leaders, it's to make sure there is an AI fluency training that's available for anybody who joins the job, no matter what they're coming in for. They might be coming in as an accountant. There are AI tools that they need to understand. It's not just understanding the basics of accounting or becoming a master at finance. It's about also understanding what AI tools are available for finance professionals, for accountants, and being able to use those tools effectively. So, leaders that provide that kind of environment, leaders that provide continuous learning opportunity, because there'll be constantly new tools that come in. Leaders providing that continuous learning opportunity are going to thrive in this era.
Well, as we wrap up, any final thoughts or advice to leave with our audience of corporate directors and senior leaders?
I do think as corporate directors, you also have to get equally AI savvy. No, doesn't mean you need to write the AI algorithms, or doesn't mean you need to understand Python or R, but you do need to understand the basics of AI. What is machine learning? What is deep learning? What's computer vision? How does this impact my organization? How does this impact an industry? I think as corporate directors, it's important to focus the time and energy to not only learn about AI, but start using AI tools in your job.
I love that. Well, Beena, great advice. And let's move into a couple of questions we ask all of our guests. The first is, what do you think will be the biggest difference between boardrooms today and 10 years from now?
Oh, I don't think we'll have to wait 10 years for this one, but a more tech savvy board, a more AI savvy board. Yeah, AI is still early in its journey. There is still a lot to be done, and there's still a lot of research happening in this space. So I think we'll see more AI savvy board members in the boardroom.
Definitely agree with you there. Well, lastly, what is your current passion project?
An area that I've been looking at a lot is DPIs, digital public infrastructure. When you are entering this AI native world, a digital world, what's the impact to the public infrastructure? How can you, whether it is you're talking about digital identity or digital payments, what are those new systems that come into play? And we're seeing pockets of it in different parts of the world. So I'm very excited about the potential of DPIs, and I've been looking a lot into that area.
I love that. Well, we'll have to have you back on the show next year because I feel like the world of AI will look radically different a year from now, just with the rate of change that's happening. So thank you so much, Beena, for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan.
Megan, thank you so much for that interview. I'm so glad we had a chance to have Beena on the show. She was one of the faculty members for our AI ethics and board oversight program. And I always find her take to be really reassuring and very optimistic, I would say, but in a way that makes a lot of business sense. And so I'm glad we had the chance to talk to her. What were some of the big ahas for you coming out of that conversation?
Well, it goes hand in hand with something that we've been saying a lot at Diligent lately, both internally and externally to our customers. This idea that you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to the person who knows how to use and leverage AI to be more effective, to open up new doors and to embrace new possibilities. And I think that really rung true in this conversation.
I very much want to cling to that, Megan, but I will tell you, I'm of a couple minds there because, firstly, I think that is emphatically true in these early days. I still feel like we're very much in the early days of this AI evolution, right? To me, I'm old enough that I remember so keenly what it was like when the World Wide Web, started to hit businesses in the early 90s. And, at first it felt very novel, and it was like, oh, we could build a website, we could build a better website. And then it just became the way everything happened. And so many things were disrupted by it. So many things were accelerated by it, but other things were completely disrupted by it. Like I think specifically of like graphic designers and, a lot of people that spent most of their time working on print publications. Print very quickly became quite passé, within about 10 years of the World Wide Web becoming the thing. So I had the opportunity to be at this director roundtable in June at the Financial Times Outstanding Directors Exchange. And we did a roundtable on AI and sort of disruptive technology. And there was a director in the room who had such an interesting comment. And it was, and I'm not going to give specifics because everything was sort of under Chatham House rule, but had a great commentary about the way that this one particular role within the company, people kind of come in at an entry level, they learn the ropes by doing a lot of just routine stuff, and that trains them really well for a future role in management in that same functional area. So, an example would be the legal profession, right? Like, so a paralegal comes in, they spend a lot of time looking up statutes, looking up contracts, doing that kind of like basic review of documents. They learn a lot about that. And over time, they begin to sort of understand how the company applies certain principles or how it sort of looks at things, how it thinks about things from a legal perspective. And that then makes them more eligible to take a little bit more senior legal role. And the comment this director made was, what do we do when that entire pipeline and career path is completely upended by AI? Because that whole process has been automated by AI. Something like looking up contracts and finding the differences, that's the kind of thing you throw AI at very willingly because it's going to do it probably better than the human, faster than the human. But then the human isn't learning the ropes. And in fact, there was this really interesting study that I saw about a week after that coming out of MIT. Now, I'm a researcher, and full disclaimer, this was a very small scale study. I think there were only 54 participants. So it's the kind of thing that needs to be repeated a lot and reviewed. But in this little study that they did, they took a group of people and they had them write essays. And some of them wrote essays using no tools at all. Some of them wrote essays using, Google and search engines, and some of them wrote essays using ChatGPT. And then they hooked everybody up to EEGs to look at their brain function. And what was really fascinating was the people who were using ChatGPT, it was as if they were asleep. There was like almost no brain function. And the people that were using no tools had the highest brain function. The people using search engines were somewhere in the middle. But interestingly, when they then switched the groups, the people that had started with ChatGPT and then had to use just their brains still had lower brain function. The people who had started with their brains and then used ChatGPT still had higher brain function. And so it speaks to something that concerns me, which is how do we make sure that we're using AI as a thought partner and not as a replacement for thought? And I'm not so sure in this race to automate things and this race for efficiency and this race for productivity, I'm not so sure we're thinking this way. And it concerns me. Your thoughts, Megan Day?
That's a lot to unpack, Dottie. I don't know that I don't.
You're welcome.
I don't disagree by any means. I very much agree. I think personally, where I have been most successful in embracing AI in my job are the areas where I already know what good looks like, and it's able to speed my work along as someone who can get me to the output that I need faster than me sitting with a blank screen. But again, to your point, I already know where I need to go. I have the skills and expertise to get the machine there.
Yeah. I will say, I don't remember where we first saw it. It might actually have been from our CEO, Brian Stafford. There was a fabulous podcast and article that was circulated by this guy, Jeff Woods. He's written a book as well called The AI-Driven Leader. And he's got this really interesting framework or rubric, I'm not sure what you would call it, that you can use to turn generative AI into your thought partner rather than abdicating thought to generative AI. And the way that he structures it is you basically use ChatGPT or whatever tool you have. And by the way, you don't use the freebie version. So you're not, all your great IP is now training the model. No, this needs to be something that is proprietary to your company. But when you have that capability, you then use it to almost create like a board for yourself. So you train it to have different agents with different personalities and different perspectives. And then you bring problems to it and say, frame this problem for me. And that's really powerful because what it does is it helps you to kind of see things with a different perspective. It's as if you're a CEO and you're taking something to your board and saying, board, frame this issue for me. And where might I get some contacts that could help us with this problem? And where might I, get some assistance with this particular issue that we're dealing with? And it's really good at looking at the sum total of human knowledge and surfacing up some interesting ideas for you. I'm not saying, by the way, that it should replace boards. What I am saying is it should augment and supercharge boards because sometimes we're limited by what the people in the room know or by what the people in the room have access to. And maybe using generative AI in this way gives us a different capability and allows us to use the stuff that people in the room know in addition to the rest of the world's knowledge. But again, to your point, Megan, we still have to have humans in the loop. We have to make sure we're vetting that information, that it's accurate. If it's stuff that you're an expert in, it's way easier to do that. When you're not an expert in something and you use ChatGPT or generative AI, you might get in a little trouble.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes it doesn't give you correct information. So I don't know. You're right. There was a lot to unpack there, but I hesitate a little on the rah, let's use AI for everything when I think there might be some things we don't want to use AI for. There might be some things where it becomes a disadvantage. Like it completely upends a whole career path, and maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe that has downstream consequences that we need to think through. Or we use it to wholesale replace entire sectors of white collar work, which frankly, I think hurts companies. I don't see that helping companies. I mean, maybe in the short term, it helps you save a little money on the bottom line. But in the long term, have you just taken the purchasing power out of your entire consumer base? Have you, upended people that you would typically partner with? Have you made it harder to hire? I think we have to just sort of think through some of these downstream consequences before we get really into the idea of using AI to replace people.
Yeah, it's funny. I keep coming back to the Duolingo example from a couple of months ago where the CEO came out and made all of these proclamations that, they're going to replace their workforce with AI, and the consumers of that solution lost their minds, and the internet revolted and he backtracked. I think that is very much reflective of sort of the struggle and divisiveness of AI right now. I think very quickly that is going to change, and it is going to be much more integrated in every person's life, whether we like it or not.
Well, that's for sure true. And the other thing that's also true, Megan, is eventually we don't need to have whole shows about AI. It's just going to be part of every conversation. Right. I made this comment. I was at a conference on Friday, and I was talking to the conference organizer because I got there a little bit late, and I said, "So how's it been going?" And they said, "Well, no matter what the agenda item was, every single conversation has been about AI." I thought that's the way it's going to be. I mean, because it's going to infiltrate every single part of our work and our lives, and it's just going to be part of everything that we do. And so, very quickly, it just becomes the way we get stuff done.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm really glad you had the chance to talk to someone who is much more knowledgeable on these topics than I will ever be, and can, in a much more thoughtful and nuanced way, talk about these issues. Because Beena Ammanath is fantastic. And if you haven't a chance to check out her books are just so good. They're so identifiable. They're so validating. They're so impactful. I loved Trustworthy AI. I haven't had a chance to read Zero Latency Leadership, but I've got it. I'm looking forward to reading it. She's just terrific. So can't say enough good things about our friend Beena. I'm so glad she joined us on the show. Well, Megan, that wraps up another episode of the Corporate Director Podcast, the voice of modern governance, still brought to you by humans. We'd like to say a few special thank yous, first and foremost to our actual AI expert, Beena Ammanath, podcast producers, Kira Ciccarelli, Steve Clayton, and Laura Klein, the sponsors of the show, PwC, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, and Meridian Compensation Partners. And most especially, thanks to Diligent for putting up with our show. If you like our show, please be sure to give us a rating on your podcast player of choice. 5 stars only, please. You can also listen to our episodes and see more from the Diligent Institute by going to diligent.com/resources. Thank you so much for listening.
You've been listening to the Corporate Director Podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to learn more about corporate governance and tools to help directors do their job better, visit www.diligent.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.